All right. Well, welcome to the Spaghetti Westerns of Sergio Leone. Um, this is a presentation I just wanted to give because I really appreciate his Westerns and I want to spread the love a little bit. Um, uh, so without any further introductions or anything, let's just go ahead and jump in. But first, I do want to introduce myself. My name is Matt. I am a writer, I'm a podcaster, I'm a game master. You can find all of my stuff at dicegeeks.com. I create resource books that help tabletop role players and GMs and DMs help run better games. And so I create resources for that. However, I have also in the past, in like almost another lifetime ago, I studied film in college, and I also was an independent filmmaker for a little while, and I just love movies. I love cinema. I love the history of cinema. And so I wanted to take this time and talk about Sergio Leone. I do want to say, that I will preface, right, that I am not an expert. Okay, I'm just not an expert. If I say something that's an error or something, I really apologize. But I am just a huge fan, and I love exploring some of these topics. So, and some of this film history, right? And I probably should have also done a better job of kind of marketing this seminar. I do want to mention some of the techniques that he uses in his films and how we could use those in our games, right? When we're the dungeon master, when we're the game master, how we can use some of these techniques, storytelling techniques in our games, because not all of them have to do with cinema and camera tricks and stuff like this. Some are just good old-fashioned storytelling techniques that anybody can use. So that is something else I want to do as we look at the Westerns here. All right, so Sergio Leone here. As you can see, he was born in 1929. He died in 1989. He was only 60 years old, which is really a shame because hopefully we could have gotten some more movies if he would have lived longer than that. Just some interesting things about him. Why are they called spaghetti westerns, right? Just to kind of fill in that as well, because Sergio Leone is Italian. These were Italian productions of American westerns, and so they've picked up the name spaghetti western. And that is just something that people have called them. But Sergio Leone here, he was born into filmmaking. His father was a screenwriter and a director, and his mother was a actress during the silent era, all in Italy. So Leone, he was born right into that industry, and he just grew up in that industry. He had even acted a little bit, I believe, when he was young in a very famous Italian film and different things like that. But, as he became an adult, of course, he worked in the film industry. He became an assistant director on some of the huge Hollywood like biblical epics and Roman epics and historical epics that were all shot in kind of the Mediterranean or shot in Italy, all around there. So he became an assistant director on some huge movies during like the late 40s and into the 50s. And so he was around some of these big, huge Hollywood productions that were shooting over in Europe. But he, of course, was just an assistant director, but he would handle a lot of duties around the crews that spoke Italian or actors that spoke Italian, where the Americans didn't speak those languages. He handled a lot of that kind of stuff, and I am sure he learned a lot about directing movies as well from being on set on some of these huge, massive Hollywood productions. The first movie that he directed, from according from my research, was a movie called Last Days of Pompeii, but he was fired from that, and he was not accredited as director. His next film was called The Colossus of Rhodes. And it is available for rent on Amazon. I was going to try to watch it before this presentation, but I just did not get an opportunity. I apologize for that. But this is more focused on his Westerns, but he did this Colossus of Rhodes, this kind of epic, mythology tale movie. And it looks quite interesting. And so I definitely am going to check it out. But, since we're focusing on the Westerns, but I just wanted to mention those just to kind of give, an idea of that he was around film. He grew up around film. He was in film. The film is family business kind of thing for Sergio Leone. But right after Colossus of Rhodes, he directed a little movie called A Fistful of Dollars. Now, I don't think that was the original title. I believe the original title was The Magnificent Stranger or something like that. But fortunately, a marketer got a hold of the movie and changed the name to A Fistful of Dollars, which is way better than The Magnificent Stranger. And this movie kind of changed everything. Okay. This came out in 1964. It starred, at the time, who was a little-known television actor named Clint Eastwood, that took a job, during hiatus of his TV show, took a job to be in a movie. So why not? You get to go to Europe and you get to film a movie. And so Clint Eastwood went over and shot a movie with Sergio Leone directing, and it became A Fistful of Dollars. A Fistful of Dollars is quite interesting on a number of fronts, because the Western in America was actually dying, right? It was popular on television, but as features, the Western was kind of dying. Well, A Fistful of Dollars comes out. A Fistful of Dollars became like it was just a massive hit. It was just a huge hit. Clint Eastwood was not obscure anymore, right? He was not a Hollywood player anymore. He was, he was a movie star. He was a bona fide huge movie star after this movie. And Sergio Leone got a lot of recognition as well after this movie. No, I hope everybody has seen this one. It is a very, like I said, it's a very interesting film. It's a very, it's a very entertaining and engaging film. I mean, it's very easy to see why it became a global hit. But just a little trivia about it. It is pretty much a straight up remake of Akira Kurosawa's film Yojimbo. If you want to go back and watch Yojimbo, it's well worth watching. It's Akira Kurosawa. You should watch all Akira Kurosawa movies. So this is basically a remake. So Yojimbo just came out a few years prior to this, right? It just came out in like 1960 or 1961 or something. But Sergio Leone and his team here just remake the thing. They just remake it. They don't get permission. They don't credit anybody. They just remake it. And it works as a Western extremely, extremely well. Now, some other things to know, right? That Italian films at this time, they were all shot what is called MOS, which means without sound. I have no idea why it's MOS instead of WOS, but that's MOS is without sound. And all Italian movies were shot without sound because you have to go back to, the era of the early 1960s. The cheaper movie cameras, that movie cameras that you could afford on a lower budget movies were loud. They were very, very loud. And also controlling your environment was hard. So you couldn't have a camera, 3 feet away from an actor and then pick up dialogue because the camera was so loud, right? The mechanism in the camera was so loud. That is also the problem, or the reason, I guess it's not a problem, but it was just a reason why some of the Kung Fu movies, if you're familiar with a lot of the Kung Fu movies from the 60s or 70s in Hong Kong, they had the same problem. The movie cameras they could use were so loud they couldn't record the dialogue, so they had to record it later, which is called ADR or looping. So A Fistful of Dollars is kind of interesting in that the ADR, or the looping of the voices, not only did they have to shoot without sound, it also covered the fact that some of the actors couldn't speak English, right? It also covered that fact that you could then dub everybody pretty easily. In A Fistful of Dollars, the looping, I just watched it the other night again, it is not very great, right? So it's very easy to see that the dialogue is looped, that it is cut in, and it's not the best looping in the world. Still, this movie, like I said, global hit, huge, right? Huge, makes Eastwood a star, kind of rejuvenates the feature Western, and it jump-started, Leone's career as well. And here are just some stills. I'm going to show a few stills from the movie, because what is important to understand about some of Leone's work is that his work is very stylized, okay? His direction is very stylized. His camera is very stylized. His actors are placed in very particular locations to create very stylized images. And I've watched some documentaries and I've seen some interviews with some famous filmmakers, and some filmmakers criticize Leone for this, that they say his films are artificial, right? Because the perfect staging of the camera or the aligning up of the actors are things that wouldn't happen in real life. And with all due respect to some very famous filmmakers who can make movies way better than I can, I think they're totally wrong. I think they're way off base, because I already know I'm watching a movie. I know I'm not watching real life. Why not see something that's stylized and a heightened reality, right? I want to see a heightened reality. I don't want to see reality. I want to see something better than reality, right? And so when I go to a movie, I want to see something like that. And I'm going to show some stills here really quickly. I also mention something about like a Fistful of Dollars and some of his other movies that we're going to talk about, right? They're cool, right? And this is the best way to like kind of describe it, right? Like, he makes Clint Eastwood looks so cool. And of course, Clint Eastwood doesn't hurt himself in that regard either, right? He's so cool anyway. But the movies are cool, right? Like A Fistful of Dollars here, the character in here that's named Joe, Clint Eastwood's character, is just cool. And the stuff that happens is cool, right? And we're gonna see that in some of the later films. And I don't know of a better word to describe it, because it's just so cool. And this is something that we can take in our storytelling, and when we're doing role-playing games, when we're playing at the table, when we're a dungeon master, how do we make our players' characters cool? How do we make them look cool? How do we put them in cool situations? I think those are really good questions that we should ask ourselves while we're role-playing, while we're creating a story together at the table, because Leone, at least for some of these movies, he was a master at it. Clint Eastwood just looked cool, and some of the situations he's involved in were cool. And I wish I had a better word, but that's what I have. All right, so here's some stills from A Fistful of Dollars. All right, so just check this out. Look at this composition right here. Okay, we see Eastwood here. He's on the third kind of the back third of the frame, which is perfect framing for the rule of thirds, if you know anything about kind of the widescreen framing here. But look at the building, look at those lines in the building, look at his position, look at where the camera is positioned here, right? If we start over at the left, look at that line of the balcony and the line of the archways pull us right to what? To cool Clint Eastwood, right? They pull us right over here to Eastwood being cool. That composition is amazing. And here's another shot from A Fistful of Dollars. I mean, just look at this composition right here, right? I mean, this whole composition tells a story, doesn't it? Here's Eastwood in the background, but we got our villain over here. We got the gun on the ground. Look at that composition in the background, how everything is on an angle that pulls our eye from, you know, again, starting at the left, we got the building, but then we pull into Eastwood, and then it goes right across the frame with that line of buildings in the back to the gun on the ground, to the leg and hand of our villain right here. Amazing composition. Here's another still from the movie. Look at this right here, right? You got this bleak town. Most of these movies were shot in Spain, even though they're Italian productions. But look at this. So now Eastwood is on the front third of the film. He is right on the frame, I should say. He is right there on that line. And then look at the town, right? The buildings are set up. It pulls your eye into the town, and it is bleak. It is desolate. Why aren't there people walking around? Why isn't this normal? Well, because this town is in trouble. And here comes our magnificent stranger, who's named Joe. And he is going to set this town right, even though it may be a little brutal when he does. Here's kind of a final still from A Fistful of Dollars. So you can see again here, look at this kind of the frame within a frame, right? He's using the timbers here of the well to frame Eastwood as Eastwood looks on and sees what's happening, right? This is when Eastwood's character right here is getting a sense that this town is messed up and something really bad is happening in this town. And for whatever reason, right, he is going to decide that that's not going to stand, and he's going to fix it, even though he has kind of his own methods, let's say. All right, well, A Fistful of Dollars, huge hit, right? Huge hit. What happens when you make a huge hit movie? They want you to make a sequel. They want you to make a sequel, and they want you to make it fast, right? Because you want to get those dollars going. So here comes a sequel. For a Few Dollars More is 1965. We get a higher budget this time. We get veteran Hollywood actor Lee Van Cleef. He joins the cast. Clint Eastwood is back, of course. And this movie is, I mean, it's just great. It's just phenomenal. I watched it the other night again, and it's fantastic. Again, just kind of pushing all of the things I mentioned about A Fistful of Dollars, the cool factor, the compositions, the storytelling. Leone was just pushing it, you know, even further with A Few Dollars More. And now, since we had a bigger budget and A Fistful of Dollars was a big hit, For a Few Dollars More has better looping. They have better ADR. The voice matches people's lips a lot better. So we have a better quality there. We also get a bit more of a complex plot. And it's not just a straight remake of another movie. We get an interesting plot here. Very, very good film. Just carrying right on this tradition of Leone, just really upping his game, right? Fistful of Dollars really upping his game in the sequel here. And now I guess I should mention, there's a couple things. I say sequel, and it is a sequel because it comes after, and then even the next one, which is probably the most famous of the movies, and I'm sure you already know the name of that one. They're technically prequels, I guess. A Fistful of Dollars, according to Leone, and I just found this out a year or two, a couple of years ago. They're actually supposed to like play out in the different order, right? A Fistful of Dollars is supposed to be the last one in the trilogy. And then A Few Dollars More, and then The Good, Bad, and the Ugly is supposed to be the first one in the trilogy. But they were shot in opposite ways. They were shot in this way, so I'm going through them this way. But I guess technically it's supposed to be a prequel, but it seems like it's it's just a sequel. I don't know what the difference, if you want to, split hairs on what the difference would be on those or not. But theoretically, it would be a prequel. And then also you get to see this tagline here, right? The man with no name is back. So another great marketer got a hold of these movies, right? And sometime it's called the Man with No Name trilogy, except in A Fistful of Dollars, his name is Joe, which he's called a number of times. And in A Few Dollars More, it's basically a character says, and his name is Manco. And they say it really very prominently that he has a name. And then in Good, Bad, and the Ugly, he has a name, which is Blondie, which we'll talk about. But The Man with No Name, that's great marketing. So we're going to run with it, and we're going to do that. A Few Dollars More, if you haven't seen it, oh my gosh, do yourself a favor. This movie is great. I mean, just so good. It's so good. Well, then the next one, I've already had to kind of allude to this one, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I apologize. I have to take a drink here. So this is 1966, right? So we're getting right along 64, 65, 66, because Fistful of Dollars was a huge hit. For A Few Dollars More, huge hit. And well, you got to make another one, right? So here comes The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We get Lee Van Cleef again. We get a couple more Hollywood actors. We get Eli Wallach joining Clint Eastwood here in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And now I should mention, another one of these things that adds to the cool factor of these movies is the music, right? These movies are known for their music. Fistful of Dollars was kind of this whistling Western mixed with Italian kind of whistling soundtrack. It's great. For A Few Dollars More, again, the soundtrack is fantastic. There's some more of the whistling, but we get some chimes and some different things added into A Few Dollars More. But by the time we get to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, right, we reach like operatic levels of music, iconic music, right? The wah-wahs and all of that. The what's the one song, The Lust of Gold or whatever, which is like this operatic song that is very famous and just very powerful. The music's iconic, and again here, Leone's framing and his composition and his storytelling just really do. And I keep saying, I was, as I was preparing this, I was like, I'm saying the same word over and over again, but it's iconic, right? He creates iconic imagery. And he places his actors and he places his camera in such a way that is just striking. And it seems to him like it's almost effortless, right? It's just like everywhere where he puts the camera is just a striking angle, composition that makes you afraid of somebody, it makes you admire somebody, it makes you wonder what they're doing, right? It's cool, right? As I've said before, right? Eastwood is just so cool as he's doing all of these things in these movies. Leone just had a way of doing that, right? He had this eye, a very powerful eye, when it came to, placing the camera, placing his actors within the frame. It just quite amazing, really. And here is just one still from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Again, iconic, right? This is the iconic showdown at the end of the movie. Look at the placement of the actors. Look at the placement of the camera, right? They're in a cemetery. What's going to happen here? Somebody is going to die here today, right? You're in a cemetery already. You're already surrounded by death, and somebody is going to die here today because we're going to have this shootout in this middle of this cemetery, right? Again, I apologize. I keep using the same words. It's iconic, right? It's so cool. I need more words. I need more words. And I know I'm kind of singing the praises here, but it is, the imagery in these films are striking, and it's a no wonder. I did mention, I've watched documentaries and I've seen some things where some famous filmmakers have said his work looks artificial and they don't like that, and it doesn't look like reality. Well, I think those people are in the minority, because a lot of other people have really drawn inspiration from Leone. Robert Rodriguez, right? Quentin Tarantino sings his praises, and they've gone on to influence those directors' works, and I am sure a lot of others. Of course, you can actually see this in Tarantino's work. Tarantino is really one of the few directors who can really frame an actor's face in widescreen, and I think that's the reason for that is because Leone did it so well, and Tarantino knows that, right? And he's using some of that because Leone knew how to use widescreen, put somebody's face in widescreen. And I would challenge you, if you watch movies very closely, watch some newer movies and just watch like the Marvel movies or the Mission Impossible movies or some of those big movies like that, or the Fast and Furious or something. Watch some of those movies and you will see that the directors have no idea how to put a person's face in a close-up in a widescreen shot. But if you watch some of Leone's movies or some Tarantino's, they know how to put them in a widescreen, and it's really interesting to see that difference. Well, so Leone, right, he makes these three movies back to back because they're all huge hits. They become massive hits. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is another massive hit for him. And now he gets the call, right? The call. What's the call? He gets the call from Hollywood, and Hollywood says, all right, come on, let's make some movies. Let's make movies. You're great. We get it now. You're great. Let's make some movies. So he gets the call. Leone, by all accounts, is very happy about this, obviously, because now this usually is going to mean what? More money, more actors, more screenwriting help, all kinds of everything, better crews, bigger crews. You can tell all kinds of different stories. Well, he gets the call. He's going to go to Hollywood. And what does Hollywood say? They say, well, we want a Western. We want you to make a Western. And Leone is like, I'm done making Westerns. I've made 3 in the last, just like 4 years or whatever. I don't want to make a Western again. But Hollywood says, no. You're a Western director. Make a Western. So Leone does go back to the drawing board, and he's going to make a Western. And he makes Once Upon a Time in the West. Now, this is quite interesting because it's still classed as a spaghetti Western, but it was really, financed by Hollywood, and that, even though I think there was Italian financing as well, but this is basically Leone coming to Hollywood. And so he makes Once Upon a Time in the West. And what's interesting about this, I think, from what I've read, Leone offered Clint Eastwood to be in this movie again. He said, "Do you want to be the hero again?" And Eastwood said no, that he was like, "I've done 3 of those. I know I'm going to be in other Westerns, but I want to do other movies." So Charles Bronson now becomes the main character, our protagonist. Apparently, also, I just read that Bronson was offered parts in some of the other movies in Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and for a few dollars more, and he had turned those down. But now, hey, it's been a big hit. Here, okay, I'll work with you now. You've made 3 huge hits in a row. I'll work with you now. And so here comes Charles Bronson. He's our protagonist. What is interesting about this film is we get Henry Fonda, the famous Henry Fonda. We get him as the villain, right? Which Henry Fonda didn't usually play after he became, a megastar. What is really interesting here is that Leone was a fan of Henry Fonda. Of course, a lot of people were. Henry Fonda was a known name since, the 40s or maybe even earlier, right? He's just a known name in Hollywood, one of the huge stars. And Leone reached out to Henry Fonda, said, "Do you want to be in the movie? I'm making this movie." Of course, keeping with, like Henry Fonda, he had never heard of Sergio Leone. I believe, if the story is true, right, he hadn't even heard of the Clint Eastwood movies, right? He hadn't even heard of those, or just in passing. And so he didn't know who he was. But he did hear that a friend of his, Eli Wallach, who played Ugly in The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, had been in one of his movies. So he called him up and said, "I got this offer. Were you in one of his movies? Is this any good?" And Eli Wallach said, "Do it. Whatever they say, do it. Just do it. Whatever he tells you to do, do it." And so Henry Fonda was like, "All right, well, I trust him. Let's go." And so Henry Fonda here is the villain in this movie. And I have to say about this movie, it's not as kind of operatic as The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. But this movie is a masterwork. This movie is brilliant from start to finish. It's odd. It's slow. Like, the pacing is very slow, but if you're Leone, you pull people along with your shots, your composition, with your cast, right? You have an amazing cast, so you can have a very slow shot showing Henry Fonda's face for a long time because Henry Fonda keeps you engaged. Or Claudia Cardinale, same way, Jason Robards and Charles Bronson. You can look at them. Your cast is amazing. And so you can make a slow movie. So the movie unspools kind of really slowly, but it's a masterwork. And I have to tell you that Henry Fonda in this as the villain, you can't take your eyes off of him. He is electric, right? You can just put the word charisma, or screen presence, I guess, just right next to Henry Fonda in this movie, right? Because when he is in the frame, he dominates it, and he is electric, and you just cannot look away. It's just phenomenal to see what a good actor, or a spectacular actor and a brilliant director can do when they're combined, right? The physicality of just holding your interest, right? Like, not many actors can do that, right? Like, the top can, the echelon, right? They can just look off to the side and move their head, and you're just watching them because they're so good at what they're doing. They're so good at their craft. So this movie's a masterwork. I find that not a lot of people have seen this. A lot of people know the Eastwood movies, the Man with No Name trilogy, or the Dollars trilogy, as it's called. I find not a lot of people know Once Upon a Time in the West, and that's very sad because this movie is a masterwork. It has a different feel than The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, but it is I mean, it's just fantastic, and I'm just like heaping praise and like gushing praise. It's just an extraordinary film. It's very long, and like I said, it's very long and it's very slow, but Leone knew what he was doing when he was putting it together, so it works. It works very well. And here's just one or two stills from that. You can see here again, look at this composition, right? Look at those the three actors over here, and then our protagonist in the background over there. Look at that. Our eye is drawn just left to right to where we end up with our protagonist over there. What's going to happen in this scene, right? What do you think is going to happen? Oh, they're going to draw, right? They're going to draw down on each other, right? You can just see it. You can just see what's going to happen here. You can just feel the tension building in this scene right here in that composition. Here's another one. Look at that. Again, a frame within a frame. And again, you have a spectacular cast. So here we get a frame within a frame here. Just brilliant framing, brilliant composition. Like I said, I think Once Upon a Time in the West is a masterwork. Now we move on to another one of his Westerns. And it's kind of sad a little bit. Leone was done. He was done with Westerns when he did the Dollars trilogy, but they made him, you know, Hollywood said, do another Western. So he did Once Upon a Time in the West, and he was done. And I think you can tell that when you come to this movie here. The title of this movie is Duck, You Sucker, sometimes called A Fistful of Dynamite. Leone apparently wanted to call it Once Upon a Time in the something or other, but that didn't happen. And we get a movie here that it's from 1971. Once Upon a Time in the West was 1968. This is 71. Leone was done with Westerns, and I think you can tell. You can tell it by this time in this movie. You know, Leone was trying to do some things. He was trying to say something about revolutions and revolutionaries, and that was, you know, probably because, you know, he had grown up around some revolutions in Europe and things, and he was trying to say some things about that. And basically, it seems what he was saying is, you know, your oppressive government, and then your heroic revolutionaries who rise up to throw off that, you know, oppressive government. Both of those groups of people are all sleazeballs, right? Our heroes in this movie are kind of scummy. There's a yuck factor around it. The cool factor of the Dollars trilogy and the epic kind of nature of Once Upon a Time in the West are gone at this point. I hadn't even really heard of this movie until not too long ago, maybe a year ago or a little less than a year ago. I didn't know it was, you know, directed by Leone. I had seen it when I was a kid on one of the UHF channels. You know, we had a UHF channel back in the 80s, and I had seen it because when I watched it recently, I remembered it. And I remember watching it. But this movie is more yuck than cool. You can still tell that there's a master filmmaker back there somewhere, but there's just a number of things about this movie that that just don't work. The music, again, they have the, you know, Marconi, who's back doing the music, but the music does not work. Our protagonists aren't cool. They aren't likable. It always, I don't, like movies that start out when it shows our protagonist urinating, and this is how this movie begins. And I think this might have been the one where I picked that up, because I remember seeing it when I was a kid and I didn't like it. Maybe this is the movie where I got that, and so I don't like movies that start off like that. There's some other yuck things that I won't mention, even though the content in the Dollars trilogy and in Once Upon a Time in the West is rated R and it's hardcore. It's still cool. Some of it's horrific. Our hero's cool. The rights are wronged. In this movie, that just doesn't happen, right? It's just all yucky, and nobody's cool, and it's a very strange movie, from kind of just beginning to end. And like I said, I think you can totally tell that Leone was just done with Westerns. Also, I think you can tell that this movie was heavily influenced by the Wild Bunch. Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. And I think it was for the detriment. Leone didn't need anybody's influences at this point in his career. He could have listened to his own instincts. I have some unorthodox kind of opinions about the Wild Bunch, so I won't go into that, but I think that was to the detriment of this movie. So this movie, if you're a completist, you can check it out, but get ready for some yuck and some, no coolness here. Now the next one is kind of a hybrid. This is My Name is Nobody. Leone directed only parts of this movie. It's presented by Sergio Leone. Leone directed the scenes that have Henry Fonda in it, because Henry Fonda was like, nobody else is directing me, you can direct me, because I loved Once Upon a Time in the West. And so Leone consented to that, even though he didn't want to direct the other movie. And this time, this is 1973. We're into parody. Leone is parodying. This is just all making fun of Westerns, right? The movie does kind of work. It's a little over the top funny when the nobody character is there. Henry Fonda is, again, he is not as electric as he was in Once Upon a Time in the West, but he was still a phenomenal actor, and those scenes are very good, and they're played straight usually. But nobody, the main character, is silly, and if you like kind of a silly bit of humor, the movie is enjoyable. It's very watchable. But we've gone into parody now, and like I said, I think it was very clear that Leone was done with Westerns. He was trying to be done with Westerns, and Hollywood kept offering him money to make Westerns, and he was getting very tired of it. So he kind of capitulated, did Once Upon a Time in the West, which was amazing. And then he was truly done. And they're like, here's more money, make another Western. And we get Duck You Sucker, which doesn't work. And then we get My Name is Nobody, which is parody, which can be funny. It is a very watchable film, but it's only like half directed by Leone, and it is a parody of the Western genre. And so that is all of the Westerns that Sergio Leone directed. He only went on to direct one more movie, which was called Once Upon a Time in America, which is a gangster epic starring Robert De Niro, which it took him a long time to try to get made. And I don't know that film as well, but I wanted to focus on the Westerns here, and just try to communicate like how important the cool factor is in movies, his composition, his influence on some people who are still working, right? Robert Rodriguez has a movie called what? Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Quentin Tarantino has a movie called what? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That they are drawing a lot of inspiration from Leone, and with good reason. The Dollars trilogy and Once Upon a Time in the West should definitely be studied, should definitely be watched, should definitely be enjoyed. And that brings us to the last here with some questions. I'm going to take a drink. We have about 15, 16 minutes for some discussion. Please type some questions into chat. I'll try to do my best to answer if you want some information about certain movies. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I am a huge fan. Also, if you have a favorite of the movie, yeah, let's just have a discussion, because we have about 15 minutes here to chat. Any questions or thoughts? Hopefully you thought I did a good job covering some of these movies. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts if anybody has seen some of the other movies? Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, saying that was exciting. Thank you. Yeah, the music. Somebody's asking. I always love the music. Oh my goodness. The music is so good. And that's what gets really frustrating when you come to like Duck You Sucker, or even My Name Is Nobody. The Duck You Sucker just doesn't work from beginning to end. And My Name Is Nobody is just kind of normal music. Whereas, the Dollars trilogy, and then even Once Upon a Time in the West, it's a totally different feel to the music in Once Upon a Time in the West. And well, maybe not totally different, but it's a different feel from Good, Bad, and the Ugly. But it works, and it works really well. So the music is half of these movies, right? Like if they would have had different soundtracks, they wouldn't have been as popular. Like the Dollars trilogy, if they had different soundtracks, they wouldn't have been. Yes, Marconi, who did the music. Yes, amazing, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant music. But sadly, yeah, that Ducky Sucker is in there, and you're just like, what? How did this get in there? It didn't work. It didn't work. All right. Somebody says, I had an album with the music from the Dollars films, played it through the vinyl. Yeah, absolutely. You could, right? Because it's so good. The music from those movies is just so good. It just goes into that cool factor. Also, there are so many times when, like in A Fistful of Dollars, like Clint Eastwood's like pretending to be asleep and his eyes open, and you get the little flute like play, like he's up to something, and you're just like, that's so cool. And that continues on into For a Few Dollars More, into Good and Bad and the Ugly. It's great. And then yeah, somebody says great background music for RPG sessions. I mean, if you're running a Western, my goodness, you should play some of this music to get your players in the mood. All right, somebody asks, I just wonder how these movies were like pitched to funders. Like, what vision do they present, and how does the director, like Sergio Leone, condense his vision and attention to detail to others? This is something worth learning about for sure. Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure about some of that. I'm sure it was a very interesting, a very interesting process to get some of these movies made. Probably the first one, A Fistful of Dollars, was probably the most interesting pitch, right? Because you've had a director who was fired from one movie, and then who directed like a Greek myth, a mythological movie, sword and sandal kind of movie. And then now he says he's going to direct a Western. I'm sure that was an interesting pitch. I am sure. Somebody posted a YouTube video. I don't know what that is, but hopefully it is relevant. There are tons of stuff on YouTube where you can learn more of the trivia behind these movies. And it is fascinating. It's fascinating cinema history. Some really great filmmakers do a lot of breakdowns of some of the scenes in these movies, and they are just phenomenal. We still have about 12 minutes or 11 minutes. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Like I said, I may have, I don't know if I was a little controversial or something, saying that, talking about the Wild Bunch or something like that. Oh, somebody posts that the link is to the Good, Bad, and the Ugly played by the Danish National Symphony Orchestra live. That would be amazing. So that's definitely a great link. Thank you so much for sharing that link there. Any other thoughts? I'm going to have to listen to that as well because that's amazing. Any other thoughts? What's your favorite movie of Leone's? Oh, thank you so much. Somebody's just saying thank you and that it was awesome. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts? Yeah, we got like 10 more minutes. I'd love to discuss. Anybody have any thoughts on some of the movies? All right, somebody asked, any recent movies, Westerns that try to pay homage to these movies? I'm sure there are, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. I'm sure that you could probably find some. I'm sure that there was some movies in there that that try to pay homage. All right, well, somebody says I actually liked Duck You Sucker, and they say I'm a Lee Marvin fan. I am a Lee Marvin fan too, but I don't believe Lee Marvin is in Duck You Sucker. That's James Coburn is in Duck You Sucker. If it was Lee Marvin, I don't know, that would have been an interesting casting. Or was Lee Marvin in a different role that I'm not thinking of? Oh, sorry, meant James Coburn. Yeah, James Coburn is a great actor. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So is Rod Steiger. So those are they're great actors. There's nothing wrong with the cast of Duck You Sucker. It's just a very strange movie, and like I said, instead of cool, it has yuck. It's the yuck factor. All right, somebody posted Metallica starts every concert with Ecstasy of Gold from Good, Bad, and the Ugly. I did not know that. That is amazing. Oh, I think in the presentation I misspoke. I said the Lust of Gold. It is the Ecstasy of Gold. Thank you so much for saying that. It's very famous, that operatic, like the that kind of thing. That is the Ecstasy of Gold. I did not know Metallica starts every concert with that. That is so cool. They must be big fans of the movie, I'm sure. Any other questions or comments? We do have about 8 minutes or so left. I'd love to continue the discussion for the time we have allotted. Does anybody have a favorite out of all of them? Oh, well, somebody else, we get posted again, another link in chat for the Danish Symphony Orchestra playing for a few dollars more. So that is a great soundtrack as well. So thank you for some of those links. I'm going to definitely listen to some of those. Any other thoughts or anything? Oh, yeah. Glenn says Henry Fonda plays an amazing villain. Absolutely. Absolutely. In Once Upon a Time in the West, Henry, like I said, he's mesmerizing, right? You just can't take your eyes off of him, and he's a bad dude, right? Frank, his character in Once Upon a Time in the West, is a bad man, but you just cannot look away because Henry Fonda is so good. And then somebody said there's an interesting overlap in some of the music from A Few Dollars More to The Good and Bad and the Ugly. I am sure. There is a lot of overlaps. Somebody else says my favorites are The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West. And then somebody says I had my 12-year-old kid watch The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and they had to watch two other movies as they had to watch the other two movies as they loved it so much. Yeah, I mean, the Dollars trilogy really like transcends, right? Like, it's just like, it's so good, and those movies are just so cool. Like, I remember being a kid, and when they played for A Few Dollars More or Fistful of Dollars or Good, Bad, and the Ugly on one of our our rerun channels here in the market where we grew up, I mean, the next day, like, friends came over, and we were playing Bounty Killers, as they called them, and For a Few Dollars More, right? And they're just so cool. I mean, the movies are just so cool because I don't know. He just got the tone right. He got the composition, the filmmaking, the casting, right, is so good. And then somebody else says the Danish symphony also does Once Upon a Time in the West soundtrack. I need to listen to that too. We have about 5 minutes. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Your favorites, any thoughts about Leone's direction? Was there a movie you hadn't seen? I know some people haven't seen My Name is Nobody. So I don't know if that was something new that to somebody or anything like that. And it's just really, I don't know, just I always find it interesting because, like, we talk about Leone. He directed some of these iconic movies, but he doesn't have like a huge body of work, right? Like, it's not like, he has this huge body of work like, Spielberg or, some other directors, maybe from back in the day who directed 50, 60, 70 movies or something like that. I mean, he doesn't have this big body of work. He just left us, a few of these films, but he managed to leave us with some of the most iconic movies that are out there, which is really phenomenal. So any other thoughts? We just got 4 minutes or so. Any other thoughts? I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments that anybody would have. I hope you enjoyed the seminar. Like I said, I just love the movies, and so I wanted to cover them and talk about them. But yeah, if anybody has anything else, please, I'm here for 3 more minutes. If anybody wants to make a comment, okay, thank you. Somebody thanks me it said it was really enjoyable, as was my seminar on Jaws. Yes, I did one on Jaws earlier today. As I mentioned, these are all recorded and they will be up on my YouTube channel, and I'm going to post the link in the message board to the seminar on Gen Con online. So you'll be able to catch those if you missed the Jaws seminar or some of my role-playing game seminars. You can definitely check those out as well. And then yeah, we just got like just a couple minutes left. Oh, well, thank you. Somebody said the passion you put behind this was awesome, made it enjoyable and a pleasure to listen to. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I love these movies. I love cinema. I love all kinds of different movies. Just watching some of these movies, right? This is back in the day when I studied film in college. Movies like this wanted me to make movies, right? I also did a seminar on Ray Harryhausen films yesterday. Oh, well, somebody asked, how many times have you seen these movies, if I may ask? I've seen them a lot. I have seen them a lot. I've probably seen A Fistful of Dollars maybe a dozen times. I probably have watched For a Few Dollars More. I've probably watched that into the 20 to 30 range. Good and Bad and the Ugly, I've probably only seen that maybe about 5 to 8 times or so. Because it's just longer, and it's usually even though it's more famous, sometimes it's harder to find. Once Upon a Time in the West, I've probably watched it about 20 times as well. I had the DVD back in the early 2000s, and I wore that sucker out. I would just pop it in and watch it, really just watch it kind of over and over again. Duck You Sucker, I think I've only seen it twice. I saw it when I was a kid, and then I just watched it a couple months ago. So I've only seen that one twice. I didn't even really know that one was his. My Name is Nobody, I think that I have seen My Name is Nobody only 2 or 3 times. I watched it when I was a kid, and I might have seen it on TV again. And then I just watched it recently because I didn't know that one very well. And somebody says, yes, wow, double-digit numbers, kudos, hats off to a fan, wish I could do that. Yeah, You could also say I'm a huge fan. You could also say I wasted a lot of time watching movies at a certain stage of my life. But yes, I've watched these movies quite a lot. You know, yeah, I probably, those are probably very accurate numbers, because I also showed them to a lot of people. I also made friends watch them. I also grabbed friends and said, hey, here, uh, let's watch for a few dollars more. Let's watch this one. Let's watch these. And so I did that to a lot of friends. Before I was married, I kind of was always like, hey, you want to hang out? Sure. Do you want to watch a Western? Let's watch a Western. And so, yeah, we just have a few seconds left. I don't know if anybody had anything else. Somebody does say kids now just watch movie recaps on YouTube. Sadly, I hope that is not true. I hope that's not true. I hope they watch the real thing. All right, well, we are at time. Thank you so much for coming today. Again, like I said, this is recorded. It'll be on my YouTube channel hopefully later this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the kind words in the comments. Yes, I love these movies. I love them so much. Thank you for joining today, and I hope you have a good rest of Gen Con. Thank you so much.